I'm Zora Ellison, 28 years old. Until 3 months ago, I believed family meant showing up for each other no matter what. Then losing my job at a Chicago tech startup changed everything. I watched 6 years of sacrifice and support evaporate the moment I couldn't write another check. My mother's words still echo in my mind. If you can't provide for this family, what good are you to us? What she didn't know was that I had been quietly funding everyone's dreams and necessities for years: rent, groceries, my brother's private university tuition, even their car payments. I never complained because I thought love looked like sacrifice. What they also didn't know was that I had been planning to quit that same job to start my own consulting business. I had saved enough for 6 months of expenses and had 3 potential clients lined up. But when the layoffs hit unexpectedly, my family saw only failure where I saw opportunity. How could the people who raised me become strangers overnight? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. 6 years earlier, fresh out of Northwestern with a computer science degree and mountains of student debt, I had landed what seemed like a dream job at TechFlow Solutions. The salary was more money than anyone in my family had ever seen consistently, $95,000 a year, which felt astronomical compared to my parents' combined income of barely $45,000. I remember the day I got the offer letter. I called my parents from my dorm room, hands shaking with excitement. Mama, I got it. The job. We're going to be okay now. My mother, Marlene, had cried on the phone. She was working double shifts as a home health aide, and my father, Devin's arthritis had forced him into part-time work at an auto shop. My younger brother, Yalin, was 17 then, brilliant with music but struggling in high school, dreaming of attending Berklee College of Music, a dream that seemed impossible on our family's budget. Zora, baby, my mother had whispered through tears, you're our blessing, our angel. Those words wrapped around my heart like armor. I was going to be the one to break the cycle of financial stress that had defined our household for as long as I could remember. I was going to be the bridge to a better life for all of us. The transition into my role as family provider happened gradually, almost imperceptibly. It started small, picking up the grocery bill when I visited home, covering a car repair here. And there, my parents never asked directly. They would just mention their struggles, and I would swoop in with solutions. Don't worry about it became my catchphrase. I've got it handled. My apartment in Lincoln Park was modest but comfortable, a 1-bedroom, with exposed brick walls and windows that caught the morning light beautifully. I had furnished it carefully with pieces from IKEA and Target, creating a space that felt like home. But even as I built my own nest, I was acutely aware that my real home, my family home, needed me more. By year 2, I was covering my parents' rent regularly. Their landlord had raised it twice, and between my mother's unpredictable schedule and my father's reduced hours, they were constantly behind. The first time I transferred $1,200 to cover their shortfall, my father called me, his voice heavy with a mixture of gratitude and shame. Zora, we'll pay you back, he promised. Dad, don't worry about it. We're family. But they never paid me back, and I never asked. Instead, the financial support became a routine expectation. I automated transfers, $800 a month for their rent contribution, $200 for groceries, $150 for their car insurance. My own savings account remained stubbornly small, but watching my parents relax for the first time in years felt worth every sacrifice. Jalen's college. Years intensified everything. When he got accepted to Berklee, the family celebration was electric. He had talent, real undeniable musical genius, but the tuition was $47,000 a year. Financial aid covered some of it, but we were still looking at nearly $30,000 annually that needed to come from somewhere. "I'll figure it out," I told him the night he got his acceptance letter. We were sitting in our parents' kitchen, acceptance paperwork spread across the table like treasure maps to a better future. "Zora, I can't ask you to, you're not asking. I'm offering. This is your shot, Yellen. We're going to make it happen." My brother's eyes filled with tears, and he hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. "I'm going to make you proud. I'm going to make all of this worth it." I believed him completely. I believed in all of them. And more importantly, I believed that my role as provider was temporary, a bridge that would allow my family to build their own stability. Yellen would graduate and start his music career. My parents would find better jobs or at least achieve some financial breathing room. And I would step back, having successfully lifted everyone up. The reality was more complex. As my family's financial stress decreased, their ambitions increased. My mother started talking about moving to a better neighborhood. Yellen wanted to do summer programs in Los Angeles and Nashville, experiences that would cost thousands more. My father mentioned wanting to take a class to update his mechanical skills, but couldn't afford the time off work unless someone could cover his lost wages. I said yes to all of it. Every request felt reasonable, necessary, and temporary. I was making good money at TechFlow, getting regular raises and bonuses. My manager, Sarah Chen, often praised my work ethic and problem-solving skills. I was building a reputation as someone who could handle complex client projects and tight deadlines, but I was also building something else, identity, completely centered around being needed. My self-worth became inextricably tied to my ability to solve problems with money. Family gatherings revolved around updates on everyone's dreams and my ability to fund them. I was Zora, the successful one. Zora who made it. Zora who takes care of everyone. The weight of it never felt heavy until it suddenly did dawn. My social life became virtually non-existent. Dating felt impossible when every spare dollar was already allocated to someone else's needs. Friends from college would invite me to weekend trips or nice dinners, and I would decline, citing work commitments rather than admitting I couldn't afford both their company and my family's support. I convinced myself this was just a season, a necessary period of sacrifice that would pay off for everyone eventually. I didn't recognize that I was teaching my family to see me as an ATM rather than a person with limits, dreams, and needs of my own. The closest I came to acknowledging the unsustainability of my situation was during my annual performance review in year 5. Sarah had recommended me for a promotion that came with a significant salary increase, $115,000, plus equity options. "Zora, you've earned this," she said, sliding the promotion paperwork across her desk. "But I have to ask, are you taking care of yourself? You seem tired lately, more stressed." I deflected with humor, as I had learned to do. "Just the usual family stuff, nothing I can't handle." But that night, alone in my apartment, I had calculated the numbers. Between my family's support needs and my own basic expenses, I was saving less than $500 a month despite my substantial income. The promotion would help, but it would also likely mean my family's expectations would increase proportionally. For the first time, I allowed myself to imagine a different life. What if I moved to a different city? What if I started my own business? What if I dated someone seriously and built a life that wasn't centered around everyone else's needs? The thoughts felt both thrilling and terrifying, like imagining jumping off a cliff without knowing if there was water below. I pushed those thoughts away and accepted the promotion. My family celebrated as if they had all been promoted. My mother cooked my favorite meal, curry chicken with rice and peas, and Yalan played a song he had written for me on his guitar. For a moment, surrounded by their joy and gratitude, I felt certain I was doing the right thing. That certainty would shatter completely just 8 months later, March 15th, 2024. I remember the date precisely because it's when my carefully constructed world began to crumble. I was sitting at my desk at TechFlow, reviewing code for a client project that was supposed to launch the following week, when the email appeared in my inbox at 9:17 a.m. Subject: Important company update. All hands meeting at 10 a.m. My stomach dropped before I even opened it. In tech, important company updates rarely meant good news, especially when they were scheduled with less than an hour's notice. I had been hearing whispers about budget cuts and restructuring for weeks, but I had convinced myself that my track record and recent promotion would insulate me from any potential layoffs. The conference room was packed when I arrived. Faces ranging from curious to openly worried. Sarah caught my eye and gave me a tight smile that did nothing to ease my growing anxiety. Our CEO, Michael Brennan, stood at the front of the room looking like he hadn't slept in days. "I'm going to cut straight to the chase," he began, his voice lacking its usual confidence. "Due to market conditions and reduced client demand, we're implementing immediate workforce reductions. Approximately 30% of our staff will be laid off effective today." The room erupted in sharp intakes of breath and whispered expletives. I felt my hands start to shake. HR will be meeting with affected employees individually throughout the day. If you don't hear from HR by 3 p.m., your position is secure. Those who are affected will receive severance packages and job placement assistance. 30%. I did the math quickly. That was roughly 45 people out of our team of 150. The odds weren't reassuring. I spent the next 5 hours in a state of suspended animation, trying to work while checking my email obsessively and watching colleagues disappear into AR meetings, some returning to pack up their desks with red-rimmed eyes. At 2:47 p.m., my phone rang. "Zora, could you come to conference room B, please?" It was Janet from HR, her voice carefully neutral. The walk down the hallway felt endless. I passed Rena Marino's desk and saw her already packing up her belongings, tears streaming down her face. We made eye contact and she mouthed, "I'm so sorry." My heart sank further. Conference room B was small and sterile, with Janet sitting across from a folder with my name on it. She gestured for me to sit down, and I noticed her hands were slightly trembling too. "Zora, I want to start by saying this decision has nothing to do with your performance. You've been an exceptional employee, and this is purely a business decision based on budget constraints." The rest of her words blurred together. Something about severance, 6 weeks of pay plus accumulated vacation time. Something about COBRA benefits. Something about a recommendation letter and job placement services. But all I could think about was the automated transfer that was scheduled to hit my family's accounts in 2 weeks, and the tuition payment for Jalen's final semester that was due next month. "Do you have any questions?" Janet's voice seemed to come from very far away. When is my last day? "Today, we'll need you to pack up your belongings, and security will escort you out." Again, this is standard procedure and not a reflection of any wrongdoing. I nodded mechanically and walked back to my desk in a daze. My coworkers, the ones who were left, watched me pack with the mixture of sympathy and relief that comes with surviving a disaster. Sarah appeared beside me as I was disconnecting my monitors. "Zora, I fought for you," she said quietly. "I want you to know that." The decision came from above my pay grade. "I know," I managed to say. "Thank you for everything." She pressed a business card into my hand, my personal number. Call me if you need a reference or just want to talk. The security escort was humiliating, even though the guard, Marcus, was kind about it. He had walked out dozens of people that day, and he chatted gently about the weather as we rode the elevator down. "This ain't about you, miss," he said as we reached the lobby. Sometimes these things just happen. I sat in my car in the parking lot for 20 minutes, staring at the TechFlow building where I had spent 6 years of my life. My phone buzzed with texts from Marina and a few other colleagues who had also been let go, messages of solidarity and shared shock. But I couldn't bring myself to respond. The drive home felt surreal. Chicago traffic, usually a source of frustration, seemed almost comforting in its normalcy. People were still going about their Friday afternoon routines, completely unaware that my life had just been UPEND. My apartment felt different when I walked in, smaller, somehow, and filled with objects that suddenly seemed frivolous. The expensive coffee maker I bought myself for Christmas, the couch I was still making payments on, the stack of books I had been meaning to read but never had time for because I was always working. I called Raina first. She answered on the second ring, her voice hoarse from crying. "Can you believe this shit?" she said without preamble. 6 years, Zora. 6 fucking years and they just gone. I know. I can't process it yet. What are you going to do? Do you have savings? The question hit me like a physical blow. I had savings, technically about $8,000 in my emergency fund. But with my family's monthly support needs totaling nearly $2,000, that would last maybe 4 months if I found no other income. And that was assuming I could cut my own expenses to the bare minimum. I said vaguely. What about you? I'm thinking this might be a blessing in disguise, Rena said, her voice gaining strength. I've been wanting to freelance full-time for years. Maybe this is the universe telling me to stop playing it safe. After we hung up, I sat on my couch and stared at my phone, knowing I needed to call my family but dreading the conversation. They would be worried about the money, of course, but they would also be supportive. They would tell me everything would be okay, that I would find something better, that this was just a temporary setback. I called my mother first. Zora, what's wrong? You never call during work hours. Mom, I have some news. I got laid off today. The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Mom, are you there? I'm here. Her voice had changed, become flat and distant. What does that mean for everything? Not, are you okay? Or I'm so sorry. Just, what does that mean for everything? It means I need to find a new job. I'll get severance, so we have some time to figure things out. How much time? The question felt like a knife between my ribs. I'm not sure yet. I need to look at the numbers and see what unemployment benefits I can get. Zora, Jalen's tuition is due next month. And we just signed a new lease because you said we could afford to move to the better apartment. I had forgotten about the lease. My parents have been complaining about their old place for months. Thin walls, unreliable heat, a landlord who ignored repair requests. When a nice 2-bedroom became available in a safer neighborhood for only $300 more per month, I had encouraged them to take it, promising to cover the difference. I know, Mom. I'll figure it out. How? If you don't have a job, how are you going? To figure it out? The accusation in her voice was unmistakable. As if I had chosen to be laid off. As if I had failed them deliberately. I'm going to apply for unemployment and start looking for new work immediately. This is temporary. It better be. The line went dead. I stared at the phone in my hand, shocked by the coldness of her response. No comfort. No confidence in my abilities. Just immediate concern about how my crisis would affect her. I called my father next, hoping for a warmer reception. "Hey, Princess," he answered, using his childhood nickname for me. "How's work? Dad, I just got laid off." "Oh, baby girl. I'm so sorry. Are you okay?" The kindness in his voice made my eyes fill with tears. "I'm scared, Dad." "Of course you are." "But you're smart and capable. You'll land on your feet." "I'm worried about everyone's money, Jalen's tuition, your rent." "Don't you worry about us right now," he said firmly. "You focus on taking care of yourself. We'll figure out the rest." But even as he said the words, I could hear the anxiety underneath them. And I knew that no matter what he promised, the pressure to solve everyone's financial problems would still fall on my shoulders. When I called Yalen, he was between classes at Berkeley. I could hear music and laughter in the background, the sound of a world continuing to spin normally while mine fell apart. "Zoe, what's up?" "Hey, Yalen, I need to tell you something. I lost my job today." The background noise continued for a moment, before he seemed to process what I had said. "Wait, what? How?" I explained the layoffs, trying to keep my voice steady and reassuring. "But what about my tuition? Spring semester is almost over, but what about next year? I'm supposed to graduate in December. Not, 'I'm sorry this happened to you,' or 'what can I do to help?' Just immediate panic about how my misfortune would affect his plans. 'I'm going to figure it out, Yalen. I promise.' "You better," he said, and I could hear the entitlement that had grown over the years of my support. "I can't drop out now." I'm so close to finishing. After hanging up, I sat in my quiet apartment as evening fell over Chicago. The city lights were starting to twinkle outside my windows, and I realized that for the first time in 6 years, I had nowhere I needed to be the next morning. That night, I lay awake calculating and recalculating numbers. Severance pay would last 6 weeks. Unemployment benefits would cover maybe 40% of my previous income. My family's support needs would consume most of that immediately. I could survive for about 3 months if I was careful and lucky, but more than the financial math, I was grappling with something more fundamental. In the span of 3 phone calls, my family had shown me that their love was conditional on my ability to provide for them. The foundation of my identity, being needed, being the one who could fix everything, had been built on quicksand dot as I finally drifted off to sleep around 3 a.m. One thought kept cycling through my mind. What happens when the person everyone relies on has no one to rely on? I would find out soon enough. The first week of unemployment felt like living in a parallel universe. I woke up at my usual time out of habit, then remembered I had nowhere to go. The silence in my apartment was deafening after years of rushing. Morning routines and constant deadlines, I threw myself into job searching with the same intensity I brought to my work at TechFlow. I updated my LinkedIn profile, reached out to former colleagues, and applied to dozens of positions. I told myself this was just a temporary setback, that my experience and track record would open doors quickly. But the tech job market in early 2024 was brutal. Every position had hundreds of applicants, many from other recent layoffs across the industry. The few responses I received were automated rejections or requests for additional rounds of interviews. That seemed designed to weed out as many candidates as possible. My unemployment benefits were approved for $1,100 per week, significantly less than my previous salary, but enough to maintain my family's support if I drastically cut my own expenses. I immediately canceled my gym membership, streaming services, and meal delivery subscriptions. I started shopping at Aldi instead of Whole Foods and cooking every meal at home. The second week brought the first real test. My mother called on a Wednesday evening, her voice tight with stress. Zora, the rent is due Friday, and we're short. How much do you need? I asked, already pulling up my banking app. 800. Your father's hours got cut again, and my client canceled her services for this month. $800 was more than half of my weekly unemployment check. I stared at my balance, still healthy thanks to my severance pay, but decreasing daily. I'll transfer it tonight, I said. Thank you, baby. I knew we could count on you. But something in her tone had changed. The gratitude was there, but it was perfunctory, expected. I was no longer their savior. I was simply fulfilling an obligation. On Friday, Yalin called with his own crisis. So I need $2,000 by Monday. For what? There's this amazing opportunity. A producer in Nashville wants to work with me on a demo, but I need to pay for studio time up front. This could be my big break. Yalin, I just lost my job. Maybe this isn't the best time for expensive opportunities. The silence on the other end was sharp and accusatory. So what? I'm supposed to put my career on hold because you couldn't keep your job. The words hit me like a slap. I had been preparing to suggest he apply for part-time work or look into student loans for his final semester, but his immediate leap to blame stunned me into silence. I didn't choose to lose my job, I said finally. Whatever. I guess I'll figure it out myself. He hung up without saying goodbye. That night, I called Raina, desperate for a reality check. Girl, you need to stop, she said bluntly after I told her about the week's financial requests. You're unemployed. You don't owe anyone anything right now except yourself. But they're depending on me. If I don't help with rent, my parents could get evicted. Then your parents need to figure out their own housing situation like every other adult in America. Zora, do you hear yourself? You're treating your families. Financial problems like they're more important than your own survival. I wanted to argue with her, but deep down, I knew she was right. I had trained my family to see me as an endless resource, and now that the resource was threatened, they were panicking and blaming me for the disruption. The third week brought a devastating blow. I had a phone interview for a position that seemed perfect, a senior developer role at a startup with a mission I believed in. The conversation went well, and they scheduled me for a final round interview. I spent the entire weekend preparing, researching the company extensively and practicing coding challenges. I even bought a new blazer for the video call, determined to project confidence and competence. But an hour before the interview, I received an email that the position had been filled internally. No explanation, no feedback, just a terse notification. That felt like a form letter telling, and preparing this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I sat at my computer, still wearing the new blazer, and felt something. Inside me break. This wasn't just about a job anymore. It was about watching my entire identity crumble in real time. That evening, my father called. His voice was gentle, but I could hear the underlying tension. Princess, your mother is really stressed about money. Maybe it would help if you came home for dinner this weekend. We could all talk about the situation together. I agreed, hoping that seeing my family in person would help us find a solution that felt sustainable for everyone. Saturday dinner at my parents' house started normally enough. My mother had made curry chicken again, and Yelling was home from school for the weekend. But the conversation quickly turned to money and my job search. Any good prospects this week? My mother asked, her tone suggesting she already knew the answer. Nothing concrete yet, but I have several applications pending. How much longer is this going to take? Yalin interjected. Because I really need to know about next semester's tuition. I'm doing everything I can, I said, feeling defensive. The job market is really competitive right now. Maybe you should consider taking something temporary, my mother suggested. Even if it pays less, at least it would be income. The implication was clear. Any job was better than no job, regardless of whether it aligned with my career goals or long-term financial stability. I've been thinking about starting my own consulting business, I said tentatively. I have some potential clients already interested, and that sounds risky, my father interrupted, speaking up for the first time, especially right now when we all need stability. But it could actually pay better in the long run, and I'd have more control over Zora. My mother's voice was sharp. This isn't the time for experiments. You have responsibilities. The word responsibilities hung in the air like an accusation. Not dreams, not opportunities, not even possibilities. Just responsibilities to them. That night, lying in my childhood bedroom under posters I had hung in high school, I finally allowed myself to consider what Rena had been trying to tell me. My family didn't see me as a whole person with needs, ambitions, and vulnerabilities. They saw me as a function, the provider, the solver, the safety net. And now that I was struggling, instead of rallying around me, they were frustrated that I was failing to perform my function effectively. The realization was devastating and liberating in equal measure. On Monday morning, I made 2 decisions that would change everything. First, I scheduled a meeting with a financial advisor to honestly assess my situation and create a sustainable budget that prioritized my own stability. Second, I started seriously researching the consulting business I had been dreaming about for months. My family had raised me to believe that putting myself first was selfish. But as I sat in my apartment, surrounded by rejection emails and mounting anxiety, I began to understand that self-sacrifice isn't noble when it enables others to avoid responsibility for their own lives. For the first time since losing my job, I felt a flicker of something that might have been hope. But I also knew that the hardest conversations were still ahead of me. The financial advisor, Margaret Kim, was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who came highly recommended by Raina. Her office in downtown Chicago was small but organized, with diplomas and certifications covering one wall and a large whiteboard covered in colorful charts. "So, Zora," she said, settling behind her desk with a cup of coffee, "tell me about your situation." I had prepared for this conversation, but hearing myself lay out the facts still felt surreal. 6 years of family support totaling nearly $180,000. Current unemployment benefits covering less than half my family's monthly expectations. Emergency. Savings that would last 3 months at my current rate of giving. Margaret listened without judgment, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment, studying the notes she had taken. "Can I be direct with you?" she asked finally. I nodded. "You're financially supporting 4 adults, including yourself, on unemployment benefits. This isn't sustainable, even short-term, and it's actively preventing you from making good decisions about your own future." She pulled out a calculator and started running numbers. If you eliminated all family support immediately and focused only on your basic expenses, your emergency fund could last 8 months. That's enough time to either find the right job or build a consulting business properly. But your family consists of 3 other adults who are managing their finances before you started helping and who will need to figure out how to manage them again. This isn't cruel, Zora. It's reality. She turned her laptop screen toward me, showing a spreadsheet she had created during our conversation. The numbers were stark. Current path led to financial ruin within 90 days, while focusing on myself led to stability and opportunity. "I want you to take this home and think about it," she said, printing out the spreadsheet. "But I also want you to consider this. Every month you delay making these changes, you're not just postponing the inevitable. You're making it worse." That evening, I called Raina to process the meeting. "What did I tell you?" she said. "You've been so busy playing financial fairy godmother that you forgot you're a person with your own life to build. It's not that simple. These are real people with real needs. And you're a real person with real needs too. When's the last time you did something just for yourself? When's the last time you went on a date or took a vacation or bought something you wanted instead of something someone else needed? I couldn't answer because I honestly couldn't remember. Rena, can I ask you something? How did you get so good at boundaries? She laughed, but it wasn't entirely happy. Trial and error mostly. My parents tried to pull the same thing when I graduated, expected me to be their retirement plan. I had to choose between enabling their poor choices and building my own life. It sucked for a while, but now we have a healthier relationship. What if my family cuts me off completely? Then they were never really your family to begin with. They were just people who loved what you could do for them. The conversation haunted me for days. I started paying attention to my interactions. With my family differently, noticing patterns I had been blind to before. When my mother called, she rarely asked how I was feeling or what I needed. The conversations immediately centered on logistics bills that needed paying, problems that needed solving. When I tried to share my stress about job searching or my ideas about consulting, she would redirect the conversation back to there. Immediate financial concerns dot when Yellen texted. It was usually to complain about something money-related or to ask for help with expenses I had never agreed to cover. Last week, he had been upset that I wouldn't pay for new recording equipment, acting as if I was being selfish rather than financially responsible. Even my father, who I had always seen as my ally, participated in the pattern. His kindness was always coupled with subtle pressure to keep things stable for everyone else. The breaking point came 3 weeks later, on a Thursday evening in April. I was making dinner pasta with marinara sauce from a jar, the kind of budget meal that had become my new normal. When my phone rang, it was my mother. "Zora, we need to talk." Something in her tone made my stomach drop. "What's wrong?" "Your father and I have been discussing the situation, and we think you need to take more action about finding work." "I'm applying to jobs every day, Mom. I've had 3 interviews this week alone." "That's not enough." Mrs. Patterson down the street knows someone who's hiring at a call center. "It's not glamorous, but it pays $15 an hour." $15 an hour would be roughly $2,400 per month less than my family's monthly support needs, before I even covered my own rent and expenses. "Mom, that job wouldn't even cover my own basic expenses, much less help you guys." "Then maybe you need to move back home. Give up the expensive apartment and focus on what's really important." The suggestion felt like being asked to voluntarily step into a prison cell. Move back home, take a poverty wage job, and continue to subsidize everyone else's choices while abandoning any hope of building my own life. "I don't think that's the right solution," I said carefully. "It's not about what you think is right, Zora. It's about doing what needs to be done for the family." And there it was, the core assumption that had governed my entire adult life. My individual needs, dreams, and well-being were secondary to the family's collective comfort. What if I said no? The words came out before I could stop them. The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. "Excuse me?" What if I said I needed to focus on my own financial stability right now? What if I said I couldn't keep supporting everyone while I'm unemployed? Then I guess we'd know what kind of person you really are. My mother's voice was ice cold. "After everything we've done for you, after all the sacrifices we made raising you, this is how you repay us." The accusation was so unfair it took my breath away. What sacrifices? I'd been supporting them financially for 6 years. I had given up dating, travel, savings, and countless opportunities to ensure their comfort. "Mom, I've been sending you nearly $2,000 a month for 6 years. That's over $100,000. How is that not repaying you?" "Money we needed. Money you were making anyway. It's not like you were struggling. I was struggling. I just didn't tell you about it because I didn't want you to worry. Well, now we're all struggling thanks to your poor planning. My poor planning? As if I had chosen to be laid off. As if the entire tech industry hadn't been decimated by layoffs. You know what, Mom? I think we need to take a break from this conversation. Don't you dare hang up on me, Zora Ellison. But I did hang up. For the first time in my adult life, I ended a conversation with my mother when she didn't want it to end. I sat on my couch, shaking with adrenaline and something that might have been relief. My phone immediately started buzzing with texts. Call me back right now. Your father wants to talk to you. You're being incredibly selfish. I can't believe you hung up on your mother. I turned my phone face down and didn't respond on an hour. Later, Yellen called. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. Zoe, what the hell? Mom is crying and saying you abandoned the family. I didn't abandon anyone. I said I needed to focus on my own financial stability while I'm unemployed. That's the same thing. We're counting on you. Maybe that's the problem. What's that supposed to mean? For the first time, I found the courage to say what I'd been thinking for weeks. It means that I've been enabling all of you to avoid taking responsibility for your own financial situations. And now that I'm in crisis, instead of supporting me, you're angry that I can't continue to support you. That's bullshit, Zora. You're being dramatic. Am I? When's the last time any of you asked how I was feeling instead of what I could do for you? Yellen was quiet for a moment. You always said you had everything under control. Because I didn't want to burden you. But that doesn't mean I didn't need support. Look, I get that this is hard, but you can't just give up on us now. I'm 5 months away from graduating. Mom and Dad are counting on your help with rent. We're all in this together. No, we're not. When I needed help, I got blamed for the situation and pressured to take any job, regardless of whether it made financial sense. That's not being in it together. After he hung up, I sat in my quiet apartment and felt something shift inside me. For the first time in years, I wasn't worried about solving everyone else's problems. I was thinking about what I needed to do to build a life I actually wanted to live. I pulled out Margaret's spreadsheet and started making a different kind of plan. 2 weeks of silence followed the confrontation with my family. No calls, no texts, no requests for money. Part of me was relieved, but a larger part felt like I was grieving a death. These were the people who had raised me, loved me, shaped me, and now they were treating me like I betrayed them by simply asking to prioritize my own survival. I threw myself into both job searching and developing my consulting business. Plan. Rena had connected me with 2 of her former clients who needed help with database optimization projects. The work was exactly the kind of challenging, independent problem solving I had always loved, and the hourly rate was actually higher than my previous salary when calculated per hour. I was working on a proposal for one of these potential clients when my phone rang. The caller ID showed my father's name, and after a moment of hesitation, I answered, "Hi, Dad." "Hey, Princess." His voice was softer than I had heard it in weeks. "Can we talk?" "Of course." "Your mother and I, we've been thinking about everything you said, and I want you to know that I understand where you're coming from." The relief that flooded through me was immediate and overwhelming. "Thank you for saying that. But I also need to tell you something that might be hard to hear. About Jellen's college situation." Something in his tone made me sit up straighter. "What about it?" "The tuition numbers we've been giving you, they weren't completely accurate." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" "Jellen's been getting more financial aid than we told you. Significantly more. Between his merit scholarships and need-based aid, his actual out-of-pocket costs have been about half of what we said. I stared at my computer screen, the words not quite computing. Half. The first year was expensive, like we said. But after that, his grades qualified him for additional scholarships, and when I lost hours at work, our family income dropped enough that he qualified for more need-based aid. So when he told me he needed $30,000 a year, it was closer to 15, sometimes less. I felt like I was going to be sick. For 4 years, I had been sending money based on false information. Thousands and thousands of dollars that weren't actually needed. Dad, where did that extra money go? The silence stretched so long I thought he might have hung up. Your mother wanted to save it, as a safety net. She was worried about what would happen when you stopped helping, so she thought it was smart to set some aside. She was saving my money without telling me. She rationalized it as family savings. Money that would benefit everyone eventually. I was quiet trying to process the magnitude of what he was telling me. Not only had my family been taking more money than they needed, they had been actively deceiving me about why they needed it. How much, Dad? How much of my money did she save? I don't know exactly. You'd have to ask her. But, Princess, I need you to understand. She was scared. We both were. Your support changed our whole quality of life, and the thought of going back to struggling every month was terrifying. So you lied to me. We ... We let you believe something that wasn't completely true. But we never asked you to sacrifice yourself. You offered. The defense felt weak and hollow. I had offered because I believed they desperately needed my help to survive. If I had known they were comfortable enough to save thousands of dollars, my choices might have been very different. Does Yalin know about this? He knows his aid situation, but not about the savings. Your mother handles all the financial communication. After I hung up, I sat in stunned silence for nearly an hour. Then I called Margaret, my financial advisor. Zora, how are you doing? I just found out my family has been lying to me about their financial needs for years. They've been saving money I thought was going to necessities. I'm sorry, but I can't say I'm entirely surprised. Financial abuse often involves deception about actual needs. Financial abuse? The term hit me like a physical blow. When someone uses financial dependence or manipulation to control another person's behavior, it doesn't always involve taking money directly sometimes. It's about creating false obligations or guilt to prevent someone from making independent choices. I had never thought of my family's behavior in those terms, but the description fit disturbingly well. How many career opportunities had I declined because I believed they needed my income? How many personal relationships had I avoided because I couldn't afford to split my attention and resources? What should I do? That's up to you. But you might want to have a direct conversation with your mother about the money that was saved. If it's substantial, it could significantly change your assessment of their actual financial situation. That evening, I called my mother. She answered on the first ring as if she had been waiting for my call. Zora? Your father said he talked to you. Mom, I need to know about the money you saved. How much and where is it? I don't think that's any of your business. Money I sent for specific expenses that weren't actually needed? That's absolutely my business. She was quiet for a long moment. Roughly $40,000. The number hit me like a punch to the gut. $40,000. Money I had sacrificed vacations, dates, career flexibility, and personal savings to provide. Money they had told me was desperately needed for survival. Mom, that's almost a year of my previous salary. It was for emergencies, for the family. What emergencies? You've been asking me to cover emergencies regularly while sitting on $40,000 of my money. It's not your money anymore, Zora. You gave it to the family. I gave it for specific needs that you told me were urgent. Rent, tuition, medical bills. If those needs weren't real, then yes, it is still my money. You can't just take back gifts. They weren't gifts. They were responses to crises that apparently weren't actual crises. The conversation devolved from there, with my mother alternating between defending the deception as necessary family planning and accusing me of being selfish for questioning their choices. By the time I hung up, I was shaking with anger and something that felt like grief. I called Raina immediately. They've been lying to me for years, I said without preamble, and told her the whole story. Jesus Christ, Zora. I mean, I knew something was off about how much they were asking for, but this is next level manipulation. I keep thinking about all the things I didn't do because I thought they needed my help. I turned down a job offer in Seattle 2 years ago because I didn't want to be too far away to help with emergencies. I've been living like a broke college student while they were saving my money. What are you going to do? For the first time since the conversation with my father, I felt a spark of clarity. I'm going to take my consulting clients and stop sending any money to my family until this gets resolved. And I'm going to start making decisions based on what's best for my life, not what's most convenient for theirs. Good, it's about damn time. That night, I updated my budget spreadsheet, removing all family support expenses. Suddenly, my financial situation looked completely different. With my severance pay, unemployment benefits, and potential consulting income, I could not only survive, but actually start building toward the business I had been dreaming about for the first time in weeks. I felt something that might have been excitement about my future, but I also knew that the hardest part was still ahead of me, maintaining my boundaries. When my family inevitably pushed back against this new reality, the transformation didn't happen overnight, but it happened steadily. Over the next month, I threw myself into building something that was entirely mine. I officially registered Ellison Data Solutions as an LLC, created a professional website, and started networking with potential clients through LinkedIn and industry groups. My first real contract came from Maria Santos, a small business owner who needed help optimizing her customer database. The project was exactly the kind of work I loved, technical problem solving with immediate, visible impact. When I delivered the solution ahead of schedule and under budget, Maria immediately referred me to 2 other business owners. You're incredibly talented, she told me during our final project call. Have you considered that being laid off might have been the best thing that ever happened to you? For the first time since March, I found myself agreeing. But as my professional life began to stabilize and even flourish, my family situation deteriorated rapidly. The silence that had followed my confrontation with my mother was broken by increasingly desperate and accusatory communications. Jalen was the first to crack. He called on a Tuesday evening, his voice tight with panic. So, I'm in trouble, real trouble. What's wrong? I owe $3,000 for this semester's housing. They're threatening to kick me out of the dorms if I don't pay by Friday. How did you end up owing money for housing? I thought that was covered by your aid package. It was, but I spent some of the money on other things. Studio time, equipment, networking events, stuff for my career. I felt a familiar surge. A panic and responsibility, but this time I was able to pause and think before responding. Yalen, what about the emergency fund Mom has been building? The money from all those years when I was sending more than you actually needed? What are you talking about? Ask Mom about the $40,000 she saved from my contributions. That should more than cover your housing costs. $40,000, Zora, what the hell are you talking about? So he really didn't know. My parents had been lying to both of us, taking my money under false pretenses while keeping Yalen ignorant of the deception. Call mom and ask her about the savings account she's been building with money I sent for your expenses. Then call me back. He hung up without another word. 20 minutes later, my phone exploded with calls and text. First Yellen, then my mother, then my father, then Yellen again. I let them all go to voicemail and listen to the messages in order. Yellen, what the fuck, Zora? Mom says there's money saved, but it's for family emergencies, and she won't use it. For my housing, because that's my responsibility. Since when is my education not a family emergency? My mother, I cannot believe you told Yalen about private family financial matters. You had no right to involve in adult conversations. Call me immediately. My father, Princess, please call. Everyone's upset and I think we just need to talk this through as a family. Yellen again. You know what? Forget all of you. I'll figure this out myself. But don't expect me to come home for dinner anymore. I'm done with this family drama. I sat, listening to the anger, manipulation, and chaos in their voices, and felt a profound sense of calm wash over me. These were the same patterns that had governed my entire adult relationship with my family crisis: blame, emotional manipulation, and the expectation that I would fix everything. But this time, I wasn't going to fix anything. I called Raina instead. They're imploding, I told her, and played some of the voicemails. Good, she said firmly. Let them implode. This is what happens when dysfunctional family systems lose their primary enabler. I feel guilty. Of course you do! You've been trained to feel responsible for everyone else's emotional regulation. But Zora, listen to me. Yalen is a 20-year-old adult who spent money he didn't have on things he didn't need. Your parents are adults who have been lied to. You for years, none of this is your problem to solve. That weekend, I did something I hadn't done in years. I went on a date. Sarah from my old job had connected me with her brother Marcus, a graphic designer who was also building his own business. We met for coffee on Saturday afternoon, and I found myself talking about my work, my goals, my interest, things that had nothing to do with my family or their needs. You seem really passionate about what you're doing, Marcus said as we walked along the lakefront after coffee. How long have you been running your own business? Officially? About 6 weeks. But I feel like I've been building toward this my whole career. What made you take the leap? I considered how much to share. I got laid off a few months ago, and it forced me to reevaluate what I really wanted out of my work and my life. Turns out I've been making a lot of choices based on other people's expectations instead of my own goals. That takes courage to change. As we exchanged numbers at the end of the afternoon, I realized I couldn't remember the last time I had felt attractive, interesting, or worthy of someone's romantic attention. I had been so focused on being useful to my family that I had forgotten I was a person worth getting to know. On Sunday, my father showed up at my apartment unannounced. I saw him through the peephole, looking tired and older than I remembered. Dad, what are you doing here? We need to talk, Princess. Can I come in? I let him in and he sat heavily on my couch, looking around my apartment as if seeing it for the first time. This is a nice place, he said. Really nice. I've forgotten how well you've done for yourself. Thank you. Your mother she's struggling with all of this. The change in the family dynamic. She feels like you're abandoning us. I'm not abandoning anyone. I'm setting boundaries. I know. And I think maybe that's something we should have done a long time ago. His admission surprised me. What do you mean? We got comfortable. Too comfortable with you taking care of everything. It made our lives easier, but it wasn't fair to you. And it wasn't healthy for any of us. Dad, why didn't you ever say anything? All these years, why didn't you speak? Up? He was quiet for a long time, staring at his hands. Because I was ashamed. Ashamed that my daughter was taking better care of my family than I was, and grateful. And scared that if I questioned it, you might stop. I would have stopped if you had asked me to. If any of you had said you wanted to handle things yourselves, I know that now. But at the time, it felt like a gift. Like maybe all our struggles had been worth it because we raised a daughter who could lift the whole family up. But what about lifting me up? What about supporting my dreams and goals? We should have. We absolutely should have. And I'm sorry we didn't. His apology was the first acknowledgement I'd received that my family's treatment of me had been unfair. It didn't fix anything, but it cracked open the door to the possibility of a different kind of relationship. Dad, I want to have a relationship with all of you, but it has to be based on mutual respect and support, not financial dependence. I understand, and I think your mother will understand too eventually, but it might take some time. After you left, I sat on my couch and felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Pride in myself. Not pride in what I could do for others, but pride in who I was becoming. That night, I made a decision that would have been unthinkable 6 months earlier. I booked a week-long vacation to Portland, a city I had always wanted to visit. I found a cute Airbnb in a walkable neighborhood, researched coffee shops and bookstores to explore, and even bought myself a new camera to document the trip. For the first time in my adult life, I was spending money on something purely for my own enjoyment, without considering whether anyone else needed it more. The trip was scheduled for 2 weeks away, and I found myself looking forward to it with an excitement I had forgotten I was capable of feeling. The Portland trip was everything I had hoped it would be and more. I spent 5 days wandering through Powell's books, drinking incredible coffee, hiking in Forest Park, and having conversations with strangers about books, travel, and dreams. For the first time in years, I went entire hours without thinking about anyone's financial problems or emotional needs except my own. On my last morning there, sitting in a cafe in the Pearl District with a perfect cappuccino and book I had bought myself, I felt something click into place. This was what contentment felt like. This was what it meant to live for yourself. I took a photo of my coffee and the Portland skyline and posted it to Instagram with the caption, "Sometimes the best thing you can do is take up space in your own life." It was the first social media post I'd made in months that wasn't work-related or carefully curated to avoid family drama. The responses surprised me. Friends from college, former coworkers, and even some people I barely knew commented with variations of, "This looks amazing," and "You deserve this." Several people asked about my new business, and I found myself proudly describing Ellison Data Solutions and the projects I was working on, but the most meaningful response came from Marcus, the graphic designer I had gone on a date with before the trip. He commented, "Beautiful view, but the photographer is even better." When I got back to Chicago, we had dinner, and I found myself talking about my dreams for the business, my love of problem solving, and my excitement about building something entirely my own. "You're glowing," he said as we shared dessert. "Like, literally, you look like someone who just discovered something amazing about herself." I think I did, I said and meant it. But of course, returning to Chicago also meant returning to family drama. My voicemail was full of increasingly frantic messages from my mother and Yalin. Apparently, Yalin had been kicked out of his dorm for non-payment and was sleeping on friends' couches. My mother was demanding that I call her immediately to discuss. The family situation. I listened to all the messages, then deleted them and went to bed. The next morning, I got a text from my father. Your mother wants to have a family meeting this Sunday. She says it's time to resolve everything once and for all. Will you come? I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to decline, to continue building my new life without the constant drama and manipulation. But another part of me knew that until I faced this directly, the toxicity would continue to poison everything. I'll come, I texted back. But I want to make something clear. I'm not coming to negotiate my boundaries or to be convinced to resume. Financial support. I'm coming to explain my decisions and hopefully find a path toward a healthier relationship. Sunday dinner at my parents' house felt like walking into a war zone. The tension was immediately palpable. My mother was cold and distant, barely acknowledging my presence. Yalin was sullen and angry, pointedly ignoring me. Only my father seemed genuinely glad to see me that we made it through approximately 10 minutes of small talk before my mother put down her fork and looked directly at me. So, Zora, are you ready to stop this childish rebellion and start acting like part of this family again? The accusation was so breathtakingly unfair that I almost laughed. Mom, I'm not rebelling. I'm making decisions about my own life and finances. Decisions that are hurting the people who love you most. How is me building a successful business and taking care of my own financial stability hurting you? Because you're abandoning your responsibilities. Yalin is sleeping on couches because you won't help with his housing costs. Your father and I are stressed about money because we can't count on your support anymore. I looked around the table at my family, the people who had raised me, loved me, and shaped my understanding of what family meant. And I realized that somewhere along the way, their love had become conditional on my usefulness. Do you know what my life has been like for the past 6 years? I asked quietly. Successful, my mother said immediately. You had a good job, a nice apartment, financial security. I had no social life. I went on maybe 10 dates in 6 years because I couldn't afford to split my attention between someone I was dating and the family's financial needs. I turned down job opportunities, including one in Seattle that would have been as significant. Career advancement because I was worried about being too far away to help with emergencies. I've been living like a broke college student while earning 6 figures because every extra dollar went to all of you. We never asked you to sacrifice, my mother started. Yes, you did. Maybe not explicitly, but every guilt trip about money. Problems, every crisis that needed immediate financial solutions. Every expectation that I would handle whatever came up that was asking me to sacrifice. Yalin spoke up for the first time. So what, we're supposed to feel bad for depending on you? You're successful. We're struggling. That's what family does. The successful members help the ones who need it. What have any of you ever done to help me? The question came out sharper than I intended, but I didn't take it back. The silence at the table was deafening. I'm serious, I continued. When I was laid off, did anyone offer emotional support or practical help? When I was stressed about work, did anyone ask how they could support me? When I mentioned wanting to start my own business, did anyone encourage me or offer to help brainstorm? We supported you by accepting your help, my mother said. But her voice lacked conviction. That's not support. That's using someone. How dare you, Mom? My voice was calm but firm. I found out about the $40,000 you saved. Money I sent because I believed you desperately needed it for basic expenses. Money I could have used to build my own emergency fund, invest in my career, or simply enjoy my life. That money was for family emergencies. What emergency could be bigger than your daughter being unemployed and trying to rebuild her career? But instead of offering to help me during the hardest period of my adult life, you're angry that I can't continue. To help you. I stood up from the table knowing this conversation had reached its natural conclusion. I love all of you. I always will. But I'm not going to continue to enable a family dynamic where my worth is measured by what I can provide financially. If you want a relationship with me, it needs to be based on mutual respect and support, not financial dependence. And if we can't accept that, my mother asked, her voice icy. The question hung in the air like a threat. I looked at her, then at Yalin, then at my father, who was staring at his plate with tears in his eyes. Then I guess you'll have chosen money over having me in your lives. I gathered my purse and walked toward the door. My father followed me. Princes. Wait. I turned back to him and he pulled me into a hug. I'm proud of you, he whispered. I should have said that years ago, but I'm saying it now. I'm proud of the woman you've become and the strength you're showing. I love you, Dad. I love you too. And I'm going to work on your mother and brother. This family needs to change, and maybe you leaving is what it takes to make that happen. As I drove home through the familiar streets of my childhood neighborhood, I felt a profound sense of both loss and liberation. I was grieving the family I had thought I had, while simultaneously celebrating the life I was finally free to build. That night, I called Raina. How did it go? She asked. I think I just got divorced from my family, I said, and for the first time, the thought didn't make me cry. How do you feel? I considered the question seriously. Free, scared, sad, but mostly free. Good. Freedom is worth all the other feelings. 3 days later, I signed a contract for my biggest consulting project. Yet a 6-month engagement with a mid-sized company that needed a complete database overhaul. The project would pay more than my previous annual salary and give me the financial foundation to build Ellison Data Solutions into something substantial. I celebrated by booking another trip this time to Montreal, a city I had always wanted to explore. As I clicked purchase on the plane tickets, I thought about the woman I had been 6 months ago. Anxious, overextended, living for everyone except herself. That woman was gone. In her place was someone I was still getting to know, but someone I liked very much. 6 months later, I stood in my new apartment in Milwaukee, a beautiful 1-bedroom loft in the historic 3rd Ward with exposed brick walls, hardwood floors, and windows that flooded the space with natural light. I had moved there partly for the lower cost of living, but mostly because I had fallen in love with the city during a weekend trip to meet a potential client. Milwaukee felt like a fresh start in a way Chicago never could. Here, I wasn't Zora, who supports her family, or Zora who got laid off. I was simply Zora, building a business and a life entirely on my own terms. Ellison Data Solutions was thriving beyond my wildest expectations. What had started as a desperate attempt to replace my corporate salary had evolved into something much more meaningful. I specialized in helping small and medium-sized businesses optimize their data systems, and I love the variety and direct impact of the work. Each project taught me something new, and every satisfied client felt like evidence that I had found my true calling. My favorite client was a nonprofit called Milwaukee Youth Arts, which provided free music and art programs to kids in underserved neighborhoods. The director, Carmen Rodriguez, had hired me to help them track program outcomes and donor engagement more effectively. The work was technically interesting, but more than that, it felt purposeful in a way my corporate job never had. Zora, I can't thank you enough, Carmen said during our final project meeting. Your system has helped us understand our impact so much better. We've already used your reports to secure 2 new grants. I'm so glad it's helpful, I said, and meant it. This was what work should feel like: challenging, collaborative, and meaningful dot as I packed up my laptop. Carmen handed me an envelope, a little thank you note from some of the kids in our program. They wanted to thank the person who helped their teachers understand how much they're learning. Inside were hand-drawn pictures and notes from children I had never met but whose lives I had somehow touched through my work. One drawing showed a stick figure labeled Zora the Computer Lady, surrounded by hearts and the words, "Thank you for helping our school." I kept that drawing on my refrigerator, a daily reminder that my work mattered in ways I had never experienced in corporate environments. My personal life had also transformed dramatically. Marcus and I had been dating seriously for 4 months. Now, the relationship felt unlike anything I had experienced before. It was built on mutual respect, shared interest, and genuine care for each other's growth and happiness. "You're different than when we first met," he told me one evening as we cooked dinner together in my new kitchen. "Different how?" "More relaxed, more present. When we first started dating, you seemed like you were always thinking about something, else some problem you needed to solve or crisis you needed to manage. Now you seem like you're actually here in your own life." He was right. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't carrying the weight of everyone else's problems. I could focus on my own goals, my own relationships, my own joy. The biggest change was my relationship with money. Instead of seeing every dollar as something I owed to someone else, I was learning to make financial decisions based on my own values and priorities. I had built a robust emergency fund, invested in my business equipment and professional development, and yes, I spent money on things that brought me joy, good coffee, weekend trips, books, dinners with friends. I had even adopted a rescue dog, a scrappy little terrier mix named Milo, who had been abandoned at a shelter in Milwaukee. Caring for him felt completely different from the caregiving I had done for my family. It was reciprocal, uncomplicated, and filled with genuine affection. You know what I love about dogs? I said to Raina during one of our weekly video calls, with Milo snoring on my lap, "They're grateful for what you give them, but they don't guilt you for having boundaries." Unlike certain people we know, Raina said with a laugh. My relationship with my family had evolved slowly and painfully over the months since our confrontation. My father and I talked regularly, and he had started seeing a therapist to work through his own relationship with money and dependence. He had even found a better job, part-time work at a community college teaching basic automotive repair to adult learners. I never realized how much shame I was carrying about money, he told me during one of our calls. The therapist helped me understand that letting you support us wasn't just about financial need. It was about feeling like I had failed as a provider. "Dad, you didn't fail. You worked hard your whole life. Sometimes circumstances are just difficult. I know that now. But for a long time, your success felt like proof of my inadequacy. And instead of dealing with those feelings, I let you carry the burden. I'm glad you're working on it. And I'm proud of you for going back to work in a field you love." My mother had been slower to come around. We had spoken a few times, stilted conversations that danced around the elephant in the room. But gradually, she had begun to acknowledge that their dependence on me hadn't been healthy for anyone. The breakthrough came when she called me in November, her voice shaky with emotion. "Zora, I owe you an apology." "Okay," I said, settling into my chair with Milo. "I've been thinking about everything that happened, and I realize I made you feel like your worth was tied to what you could provide for us. That's not what I intended, but it's what I did. Thank you for saying that, Mom. I was scared. Scared of being poor again. Scared of not being able to give your father and Yalin the life I thought they deserved. And when he started helping, it felt like such a relief that I couldn't bear the thought of going back to struggling. I understand. But Mom, I was struggling too. I just didn't tell you about it. I know. And I'm sorry. I want to find a way to have a relationship with you that doesn't depend on money. It wasn't a complete healing, but it was a start. Yalin had been the most resistant to change. He had managed to finish his degree, partly by taking out student loans and partly through the emergency fund my mother had finally agreed to use. But he was still angry with me for abandoning the family and blamed me for the financial stress that had followed my boundary setting. It wasn't until he moved to Nashville and started working in the music industry that his perspective began to shift. During a rare phone call in December, he admitted that managing his own finances for the first time had been eye-opening. I never realized how much money you were sending us, he said. I mean, I knew you helped, but I didn't understand the scale of it until I had to cover my own expenses. It was a lot, I agreed. Too much. Like, way too much for someone our age to be responsible for. He paused. I think I get it now, why you had to stop. I'm glad you understand. I'm sorry, Zoe, for taking it for granted. For getting angry when you couldn't do it anymore. That wasn't fair. Thank you for saying that. Can we try to have a normal brother-sister relationship? One that doesn't involve money? I'd like that very much. As the year drew to a close, I found myself reflecting on the journey from that devastating day in March when I lost my job to this moment, sitting in my own space with my own business and relationships built on genuine mutual care. I had learned that love without respect isn't really love, it's need. I had learned that helping people avoid the consequences of their choices isn't kindness, it's enabling. And I had learned that building a life worth living sometimes requires disappointing people who have grown comfortable with your self-sacrifice. On New Year's Eve, Marcus and I went to a rooftop party hosted by one of my clients. As we stood looking out over Milwaukee's skyline, I thought about the woman I'd been a year ago, anxious, overextended, living her life in service to everyone except herself. What are you thinking about? Marcus asked, wrapping his arms around me from behind. Just how different everything is now, how different I am. Any regrets? I considered the question seriously. I missed the version of my family that had existed before money became the primary currency of our relationship. I regretted the years I had spent believing that my worth was measured by my usefulness to others. But I didn't regret the choice to prioritize my own well-being and build a life aligned with my values. No, I said finally. No regrets, just gratitude. For what? I turned in his arms and looked around at the party people I had met through my work. Friends I had made in Milwaukee, a life I was building brick by brick based on my own choices and dreams. For learning that sometimes losing everything is the only way to find yourself. As the clock struck midnight and fireworks lit up the sky over Lake Michigan, I kissed the man I loved and felt the profound peace that comes from finally living your own life. The girl who had believed her value came from what she could provide for others was gone. In her place was a woman who knew her worth was inherent, who understood that healthy relationships require boundaries, and who had learned to prioritize her own flourishing without guilt or apology. It had taken losing everything, job, family, support, financial security to find the most important thing of all, myself. And for the first time in my adult life, that felt like more than enough. There are mornings now when I wake up and forget for a moment that everything has changed. Not in the disorienting, grief-soaked way I once feared, but in the quiet realization that the life I'm living is no longer reactionary. It's mine. Authored, chosen, shaped by intention rather than obligation. Sometimes the past returns. In fragments, a familiar song playing in a cafe, a scent like my mother's old lavender detergent caught in a stranger's coat, the ding of a text notification at 8 a.m., and the flicker of old reflexes that once had me bracing for another crisis. Another request, another emergency disguised as entitlement, but now the texts are from Marcus, or Raina, or a client asking to book time for a strategy session. My nervous system still hasn't caught up to the fact that peace isn't an intermission between storms. It's the new weather. And yet, healing isn't a clean cut. It's a messy, non-linear unraveling. Sometimes it looks like joy. Other times it looks like silence. But mostly it looks like clarity. 6 months after that final dinner at my parents' house, I stood in a grocery store aisle debating between 2 brands of pasta sauce. It sounds ridiculous now, the mundanity of it, but I remember being struck by how unburdened I felt. I wasn't calculating the cost of someone else's groceries in the back of my mind. I wasn't doing math on behalf of 3 adults while trying to remember if I had enough in my checking account to cover rent and Jalen's housing fees and my mother's prescription copay. I was just picking a sauce for myself, and I cried. Not the big cinematic sobs of dramatic epiphany, but the soft, embarrassed tears of someone who realizes how much they've been missing something basic. Autonomy. Quiet. The ability to make a choice that begins and ends with your own needs. People say that time heals, but that's only partly true. Time just gives us distance. It's what we choose to do with that distance that determines whether healing actually takes root. I used to believe that love meant sacrifice, that the more I gave up, the more I proved my devotion. But the more I gave, the more invisible I became, not just to my family, but to myself. I disappeared in their needs, and the scariest part is that I was proud of it. I wore my exhaustion like a badge of honor, not realizing it was also my muzzle dot. It took losing everything to see how little I had left of myself. I'm still unpacking that. Not just in therapy. Though, yes, I started therapy. And yes, I know. Believe it should be government funded and mandatory. But in the small, unflashy moments that shape real transformation, like letting Marcus pay for dinner without rehearsing a reason why, I needed to split the bill or saying no to a client whose values didn't align with mine, even though the contract would have had in my savings account or choosing not to reply to my mother's passive-aggressive holiday invitation, even though every guilt-ridden fiber of my being screamed to respond. These aren't acts of rebellion. They're acts of return. I used to think that boundaries were walls, cold, unyielding structures designed to keep people out. But what I've learned is that real boundaries are fences with gates. They're designed to define the space you inhabit and protect the energy that sustains you. And like all good fences, they require maintenance. They rot if neglected. They lean when pushed against. But when cared for, they become a garden for the self to grow safely within. Rena calls it spiritual landscaping. I like that. It implies that pruning, weeding, and seeding are all part of the process. You can't just plant new life without also doing the messy work of digging up what no longer serves you. Some things I've buried and blessed as done. The financial codependence, the martyrdom, the need to be everything for everyone. Other things are still composting. My relationship with my mother. The ache of Jalen's betrayal. The lingering question of whether love can ever be disentangled from duty. I don't have answers for those yet. But I've learned that it's okay to live in the questions, because I'm not trying to solve anyone anymore. Not even myself. These days, when I walk Milo through the parks of Milwaukee, my new favorite route winds past Lake Michigan at sunset. I let myself feel the full texture of the moment. Not planning the next move, not problem solving. Just noticing the way the sky turns lavender. The sound of his tiny paws against the gravel. The breath I don't have to hold anymore. It's not the kind of scene that goes viral. It's not particularly Instagrammable, but it's mine, and after years of sacrificing my life for others, claiming something simple, quiet, and wholly my own feels like a revolution. I used to believe that the deepest form of love was service, that proving my worth meant proving my utility. When I was young, I watched my mother measure affection in acts of necessity, packing lunches, working extra shifts, covering for other people's mistakes, stretching $1 until it tore. And like any daughter desperate to be good, I learned quickly. Love in our household wasn't spoken so much as it was rationed. We didn't say, I love you in ordinary moments. We said it with new shoes bought on clearance. We said it with extra chicken in your plate after a long day. And when there wasn't enough to go around, love looked like giving someone else your portion. I carried that definition into adulthood, like it was scripture until it broke me. The hardest part of reclaiming your life isn't walking away from the people who take you for granted. It's confronting the fact that, on some level, you taught them how to do it. I showed them what I could give, over and over again, until the giving became a contract they never had to sign. I was the fine print, invisible but binding. And the truth is, I resented them long before I ever admitted it. There's a particular shame in feeling anger toward people you've loved and protected. A voice that whispers, but they didn't know. But they needed you. But their family. But here's the quiet, devastating truth. I needed me too. And I wasn't there for myself. The first time I said no to Yellen, really said no. Not a maybe later or let me see what I can do, but a full sentence with a period at the end. I didn't sleep for 3 nights. My stomach twisted. My brain played scenarios on loop. I'm homeless, failing school, hating me forever. None of that happened. What happened was silence, followed by anger, followed by distance. But in the space that opened up where his needs used to sit, I found something else. Breath, time, a long overdue question waiting patiently in the corner of my life. What do you want, Zora? I didn't know how to answer at first. It turns out when your entire identity has been built on being needed, having no one to save can feel like a death. There were days I sat in my apartment and felt untethered, like a satellite knocked loose from orbit. I wasn't anyone's emergency contact anymore. I wasn't a provider. I wasn't the dependable daughter, the fixer, the funder, the fallback. I was just me, and that terrified me more than being broke ever did. But little by little, I started rebuilding the story, not with grand gestures or glossy revelations, but with quiet rewrites. I stopped apologizing for not answering calls immediately. I started asking myself how I felt before agreeing to anything. I unlearned the urge to explain every boundary. Began to recognize that people who only see your value when you're useful aren't loving you, they're loving the service you provide. That distinction changed everything. It's how I knew, for example, that Marcus wasn't like the others. The night I told him I wouldn't be able to attend his gallery show because I had back-to-back project deadlines and needed a night to recharge, I braced for disappointment, for pressure, for guilt. Instead, he smiled through the phone and said, "Take care of your energy. I'll send you photos and we'll celebrate afterward." No begging, no dramatics, no scorekeeping. Just respect. It was jarring at first, to be loved without being drained, to be seen without being used. With Marcus, I'm learning that intimacy doesn't require depletion. That showing up for someone shouldn't come at the cost of disappearing from yourself. He doesn't need me to be his solution. He wants me to be his partner. There's a world of difference in that. And after years of relationships that ran on obligation and expectation, I'm finally learning to trust a love that simply lets me be. Sometimes we lie to ourselves and call it loyalty. We stay in dynamics that diminish us, because we confuse history with truth. But love isn't measured by endurance. It's measured by reciprocity. And now I look for balance. I ask myself, is this connection life-giving or life-leeching? Do I feel seen or just surveilled? If the answer isn't a full-bodied yes, I walk away. Not because I'm hardened, but because I've finally softened. Toward myself, I've spent enough of my life kneeling at the altar of being the strong one. Let someone else take that title. I'm choosing wholeness now. Choosing peace. Choosing love that doesn't cost me my self-doubt, and for the first time in my life, I believe I deserve that clarity is expensive. No one tells you that when you're in the fog, praying for answers, for signs, for direction. You think truth will feel like relief, a gentle clearing of clouds, a pathway opening, clean and obvious. But when clarity comes, it doesn't arrive quietly. It barges in, throwing the windows open, overturning furniture, shining light into corners you've kept carefully shadowed. It asks you to see. And worse, it asks you to act. The moment I realized my mother had been lying about Jalen's tuition, about the money, the need, the narrative, it was like a thread got pulled loose from the fabric of my whole identity. And then everything began to unravel, not just her story. Mine too, because I wasn't just angry at her. I was angry at myself for never asking questions, for never pushing back, for accepting that being the good one meant being the quiet one, the dependable one, the one who gave without pause, without thanks, without boundaries. I'd been complicit in my own erasure. That realization hurt more than anything. I thought setting boundaries would feel empowering, and sometimes it did. But more often it felt like loss of illusion, loss of role, loss of the praise I didn't know I'd been addicted to. There's a special kind of grief that comes from watching your relationship shift under the weight of honesty. At first, I hoped that naming the dysfunction would be enough to change it. That if I said, "This hurts me," they would say, "We didn't know, we'll do better." Instead, I got silence, then resistance, then rage. "You've changed. You're cold now. Money's made you selfish." The irony wasn't lost on me that only when I stopped giving did my worth become suspect. For weeks, I carried that ache around like a secret bruise, smiled through client meetings, delivered clean code and polished reports, posted photos of Milo and lattes and new books. But underneath, I was mourning not just my family, but the story I had built around them. The one where we were all in it together. The one where I was the bridge to better, and they were just waiting on the other side. But bridges can only hold so much weight. Eventually, they cracked. Mine did. And instead of helping me rebuild, they blamed me for the fall. I think that's when I stopped trying to repair the narrative. I started building new ones instead. Milwaukee gave me space to do that. The city is softer than Chicago, less frantic, more deliberate. People smile when they pass you on the street. Shopkeepers remember your name. There is a rhythm to life here that feels more human-sized. I found a neighborhood cafe with big windows and quiet music. It became my office, my sanctuary, my mirror. I wrote proposals there, interviewed clients, sketched business ideas in spiral notebooks. But I also journaled, sometimes for hours, trying to answer questions I never allowed myself to ask. What does Zora want? Who is Zora when no one is asking her for anything? What kind of life would she build if no one else had a vote? At first, the answers came slowly. I was so used to filtering my desires through the lens of responsibility that I couldn't tell where their needs ended and mine began, but eventually patterns emerged. Words repeated themselves. Freedom, solitude, purpose, laughter, integrity, quiet mornings. honest connection, none of those things required anyone else's permission. That was the second great clarity. Not all healing happens in conversation. Some of it happens in solitude, when the noise dies down and you're left with your own voice for the first time in years. At first, I didn't recognize that voice. It was small, tentative, but it was mine. I nurtured it like a houseplant, giving it light, space, and time. And slowly, it grew stronger. I stopped answering every call. I let texts sit unread. I learned that silence wasn't cruelty. Sometimes it was survival. Rena reminded me of that every time I second-guessed myself. You're not abandoning them, she'd say. You're choosing you. And that's long overdue. Still, I had moments where the guilt clawed back in. At night, usually, when the city went quiet and my mind got loud, I'd wonder if I'd gone too far, if I should have tried harder, if maybe, just maybe, they were right. But then I'd remember how lonely I had been, even when I was surrounded, how unseen, how tired, how everything had been about survival and service, never joy. And I would hold on to that memory like a compass, pointing me back to myself, because the truth is, some relationships can't be repaired until everyone inside them is willing to confront the truth, not just about each other, but about themselves. I did that work. I'm still doing it. But I can't do theirs. That's not cold. That's clarity. And clarity, I've learned, is a gift you give yourself. Even when it costs you the version of love you once believed was all there was. There are no parades for surviving yourself. No medals for choosing healing. No standing ovation for saying no when every bone in your body has been trained to say yes. But there are quiet victories. The kind that come with morning light and the absence of dread. The kind that don't require announcement, they just are. One of mine came on a rainy Tuesday in May. I was finishing a client onboarding call, a nonprofit in Detroit that needed help streamlining their donor data, when I looked at my calendar and realized something simple but profound. I had chosen every item on it. Every meeting, every project. Every hour of my time was mine. There was no emergency, no fire to put out. No one calling in a favor that sounded suspiciously like a demand. Just me, my work, and my dog curled up beside my desk, snoring like he owned the place. It hit me then. This was the life I used to daydream about in brief moments between obligations. Back when I couldn't imagine a week without a financial request, a phone call layered in guilt, or a bank notification reminding me that someone else's tuition came before my own groceries. This peace wasn't accidental. It was earned, and it was expensive in ways no spreadsheet could reflect. There were costs that wouldn't show up on any invoice, like the birthdays I skipped because I couldn't face the fake smiles, or the weddings I RSVP'd no to because pretending nothing had changed would have broken me in half. There were holidays spent alone because the alternative was emotional debt I could no longer afford. But even in that solitude, there was a new kind of companionship, one rooted in honesty. I stopped pretending. When people asked about my family, I told the truth. Not the messy, bitter version, but the honest one. We're not close right now, I'd say. I'm learning to love them from a distance. It was always met with a pause, sometimes awkward, sometimes relieved, like I had given someone else permission to admit their own family wasn't perfect either. There's a strange freedom in dropping the mask. You find out just how many people are holding their breath behind theirs. I started breathing deeper. Marcus helped with that too. Not by saving me, he never tried to, but by reminding me that intimacy could be safe, that I didn't have to earn love with exhaustion, that I didn't have to be impressive to be worthy. We built something slow and soft, stitched together with honesty, boundaries, and a mutual reverence for each other's independence. He never asked for more than I could give. And when I offered more time, vulnerability, space in my life, it wasn't transactional. It was welcomed, not expected. I used to think love meant carrying someone. Now I understand it means walking beside them, freely, willingly, without losing your own. Path, work, too, became a mirror of this new rhythm. Ellison Data Solutions wasn't just a business anymore. It was an ecosystem of clarity. I took on projects that aligned with my values, partnered with people who respected my boundaries, and built systems that made life easier for the communities they served. One afternoon, after wrapping up a project for a community mental health clinic, I received a thank you video from the team. It was short, just a few minutes of them sharing how my system had allowed them to serve more patients, reduce staff burnout, and apply for a grant they'd previously missed due to disorganization. I cried watching it, not because it was dramatic, but because it was real. Because my work had impact, not filtered through a company's hierarchy or polished for shareholders. Just direct, clean, meaningful contribution, and it came from the same skill set I had spent years using to hold my family together. Only now it was being used for something that didn't destroy me. That, I think, is the heart of the healing, reclaiming the parts of yourself that were once weaponized and choosing how they show up in your new life. My generosity didn't disappear. It just found better soil. My loyalty didn't evaporate. It found worthier recipients. My care, my competence, my ability to show up, they're still here. But now they're mine to give, not debts owed, not proof of love, just gifts, freely chosen, freely placed. Sometimes when I visit Chicago for work, for friends, for no reason at all, I'll drive by my old apartment. The brick one in Lincoln Park with the sun-catching windows and quiet corners. Where I once cried at 3 a.m. while writing tuition checks, I don't go inside. I don't need to. But I slow the car, I look up. I nod to the version of myself who lived there, the girl who believed she had to earn safety by suffering. I whisper, "You made it. You got us here, and then I keep driving, not away. But forward, always forward. Some days I wake up and forget how far I've come. I'll make coffee, open my laptop, check the morning light across the hardwood floors, and it feels normal now. Not miraculous, not impossible. Just mine, and maybe that's the quiet triumph no one claps for, when healing becomes routine. When peace stops feeling like a fluke and starts feeling like your address. I don't say this to tie everything up neatly. Life doesn't hand out clean conclusions. There are still moments that ache. Still days when old instincts tap on my shoulder and whisper that love is earned, not given. That silence means disapproval. That I should fix it. Call first. Apologize even when I'm not sorry. But now I have something I didn't before. Choice. I choose whether to pick up those old patterns or leave them behind. And most days, I leave them. I don't need them anymore. The version of me who needed to be everyone's safety net was born in survival. She kept me alive. She kept my family afloat. But I'm not living in survival now. I'm living in intention, and that requires a different self, one with softer shoulders, deeper breath, and unapologetic boundaries, one who says no without explanation, one who loves from abundance, not depletion, one who knows her worth is not a renewable resource for other people's comfort. The woman I've become still looks like me, still sounds like me, but her spine is straighter now. Her laughter comes easier. Her solitude no longer feels like abandonment. It feels like sanctuary, and maybe the most radical thing I've done is allowed joy back into the room. Real joy. Not the borrowed kind that comes from watching someone else thrive on their sacrifice, but the kind that rises unexpectedly in quiet mornings, in work that matters, in love that doesn't demand erosion. The kind that comes when Milo runs across the dog park with uncontainable excitement just because the wind shifted. The kind that comes when Marcus reaches for my hand and I don't flinch from the weight of it. The kind that comes when I catch my reflection and instead of assessing what needs fixing, I just smile and nod. You. Yes, you. We made it. I won't pretend that reconciliation with my family was perfect. It wasn't my father, and I speak regularly now. He sends updates on his classes, texts me photos of his auto shop students, and the odd job he's proud of finishing. Sometimes he thanks me quietly, not for the money, but for the mirror. I see things clearer now, he said once. I see me clearer too. Yalin is still figuring himself out. Our conversations are cautious, but warmer. He's working part-time in Nashville, still chasing music, but with more humility and less entitlement. Last month, he sent me a short voice memo, a new track he produced. Thought you might like this one, he said. It's about gratitude. And my mother... she's trying. We're not where we used to be. Maybe we never will be. But the distance no longer stings. It breathes. She sends texts now, not requests. Sometimes just thinking of you. That's all I ever really wanted, to be seen outside of my usefulness. As for me, I'm building, quietly, steadily, a business that aligns with my values, a home that feels like exhale, a partnership rooted in truth. A life that no longer asks me to shrink or disappear. I bought a bike this summer. One of those retro ones. In seafoam green with a basket up front. On Saturdays, I ride to the farmer's market, pick up flowers, maybe a new kind of cheese, and smile at strangers who look surprised to see someone. Happy without a performance. I'm not performing anymore. That's the final transformation. Not becoming someone else. Finally becoming myself. The self I was before obligation, before guilt, before worth was tied to productivity. The self who laughs too loudly at her own jokes, who cries during commercials, who loves spreadsheets, and sourdough and solitude, and Stevie Wonder. The self who no longer apologizes for her joy, or her boundaries, or her refusal to bleed to be seen. Because now, I don't need to be needed to be loved. I just need to be. And I'm up next. We have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch, and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.